When I say a person is pragmatic, that's generally a compliment, right? These people are practical. They're salt of the earth. They're down-to-earth people. They don't put on pretensions, blah, 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 whatever. Find them everywhere. You can find them everywhere, and you can find people that are foolish in every single strata of society, and you can find people that are down-to-earth and pragmatic. But the philosophy of pragmatism really screws up spiritual endeavors. Really screws them up. When you get worried about the length of a Canaanite's arm, you are forgetting about the sovereignty of God, His omnipotence, His power, His presence, those kinds of things, right? So they say, we've gone, we've spied it out. It's a land that devours its settlers or its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw are men of great size. We saw the Nephilim. The sons of Anak are part of the Nephilim, and we became like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight. Saying it's not just humans God is asking us to go in and annihilate, in my opinion. These are people that have angelic hybridization, is what we will call it. Y'all know what hybridization is, roughly? Yeah, it's actually technically two different species. We talk about it in honeybee language. Y'all know I mess around with bees a little bit. And everybody wants to know, because there's one chucklehead in El Paso. Unfortunately, he's the chucklehead that gets on the news. I won't name his name, but if you want to know, I'll tell you to warn you off. And in his opinion, everybody has killer bees. There's not a single bee in El Paso that's not a killer bee. And you've got to let the professionals take over. You've got to move into a hotel for 5 days while we deal with your Africanized killer death bees. We're going to bring the transformers in from the dark of the moon to deal with this, but we can't show you because it's secret. All of this stuff. Can't do it, right? And when somebody asks me, are these Africanized bees? I say yes, but that just means they're hybridized in the terms that we use, right? Hybridization, they get some characteristics, they don't get others. Sometimes they have weird characteristics that are Africanized bees, but they don't get the meanness, right? That's okay. What we see when we're talking about the Nephilim and angelic hybridization with humanity is that doesn't happen. You don't get good traits out of it, right? I might get some Africanized bees that like a hole in the ground to make their home, but they're nice. There are no nice Nephilim, is the way Scripture presents it. Sons of the Anakim, right? Okay, so they're dangerous. They're warriors. They're huge. So verse 14, that's kind of a review. It says this, then all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole congregation said to them, would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would that we had died in this wilderness. Why is the Yahweh bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become plunder. Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt? Now you can tell that their emotions are not under control, right? We talked about this, right? There's a country song from the 90s that says, when you leave that way, you can never go back. We could play it as the theme song here for Israel, right? When you leave Israel that way, when you leave Egypt that way, you can't ever go back. You can't go back. They're going to put the Pharaoh's blood, their army's blood on your heads, and they're just going to annihilate you. And God's not going to protect you. What are the options they're giving? We're going to go back through the wilderness. How did they survive the wilderness in the first place? Was it because they were Boy Scouts? We don't even have Boy Scouts anymore. We got just Scouts. The Girl Scouts aren't foolish like that, by the way. I did a bee removal over at the Girl Scout facility on Friday night, emergency. They got archery, and they didn't want to have to shoot the bees. Girl Scouts are still Girl Scouts, but Boy Scouts, we can't have that. That's sexist, right? But they hadn't learned how to go camping. They didn't have be prepared as their motto. They didn't have enough provisions. In fact, they weren't prepared for this at all. God told them, take all the wealth of Egypt with you instead of, water and food. I'll provide food for you. Remember the meat incident, 10 homers of quail rotting between the rabble's teeth. That's important to remember. There's no guarantee you're going to survive going back to the wilderness with all these people anyway. Would that we had died in the land of Egypt. They're saying is, wouldn't we have just died old and fat in our beds instead of here by the sword? Why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become plunder. Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt? That's how the ancient Near East rolled, right? These are the men that are crying like this, by the way. Primarily, it says the people. But they're distinguishing themselves from the women and children. And they were taken into slavery themselves. So it wasn't just genocidal. Because, frankly, women and children were considered possessions. And no more would a conqueror take your gold and your silver and your animals and your land and your property. They would take your women and your children also. Not only would you be annihilated, you would be humiliated for the rest of history, is the way they saw it. And that was part of the conquest. So they said to one another, let us appoint a leader and return to Egypt. Y'all know the definition of pure democracy, right? Micah, do you know the definition of pure democracy? What is it? Okay, well, now is it polite enough to say in Sunday school, son? Okay. Mob rule. That's what I was looking for. Pure democracy is pure mob rule. It doesn't matter if they're crying a lot. It doesn't matter if they're screaming a lot. It doesn't matter if they're tearing down people's businesses, like they've been doing all over the country for the last couple of years and probably will do again before it's over. You know what mob rule looks like? It looks like people threatening violence against Supreme Court justices and releasing their addresses in public in violation of federal law, particularly. Let us appoint a new leader, or a leader, and return to Egypt. Now, how many times have they learned the lesson that Moses is the leader that God has appointed? It doesn't matter how close you are to his family, Aaron, Miriam. It doesn't matter how awesome you are. It doesn't matter that you're the only one left. Aaron learned that. Aaron's taken the brunt of these lessons, hasn't he? Oh, I threw in the gold and out popped a calf. There's the blood of many on his hands who followed him into that foolishness. Let us appoint a leader and return to Egypt. In two different chunks, I've been the pastor of this church for 12 years. And we have a number of things, appropriately, in our bylaws and constitution that we vote on. Notably, we don't vote on most things, actually. But notably also, some people are confused by this. Over the years, I've had people come to me, sometimes with a little tear in their eye, upset about something, a little emotional. And they say, Pastor, we need to do this differently. Can we at least have a vote on it? No. We cannot have a vote on it. We cannot have a vote on it unless the bylaws in the Constitution say we're going to have a vote on it, because we actually follow ours. We're not going to have a vote on it. The reason we're not going to vote on it is similar to this. It may not matter. It may be inconsequential. But we're not going to set the precedent that every time somebody cries a little tear, we get to have a vote. And the people who are sad with that person get the same vote as the people who are still thinking rationally about a problem and a solution. Right? Because we're not going to submit. We're not going to go down the hill of mob rule. Anybody who thinks that a local church runs all right as a pure democracy is a fool. Nothing runs well as a pure democracy. Zero things. The last time it was tried, everybody got conquered. The leaders have to lead. That's how it goes. Plus, we already mentioned this, you're not going to take 600,000 to 6 million people across the desert without God's provision and protection. You're asking for a leader to virtually crucify himself by taking a vote on this. Notice they didn't find anybody. At least there was no big fat fool standing up in front of everybody saying, yeah, I'll take Moses' job. I'll take Moses' job. Anybody want to take Moses' job after we've gone through Numbers? No. All right. Let us appoint a leader and return to Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces in the presence of all the assembly of the congregation of the sons of Israel. I haven't been clicking my slides. I couldn't find a good one. It's not clicking. Hey, Brennan, it's not clicking. What do I do? Oh, there we go. There we go. Oh, we're way ahead of that. Sorry. Y'all, I'm telling you, I have cooked barbecue for 5,000 people who rode their Harleys to a convention, but I will forget the forks and the pickles and the onions. You know, that kind of thing. Details, man. Here we go. So this is not ancient Near Eastern, but there are still monastic orders at certain days of observation that prostrate themselves this way. It is not allegorical. When it says they fell on their face, it's not on the inside, right? They fell on their face. Normally it's an expression of absolute and utter obeisance. And that's what it is here. I don't know what order this is, but this is an example of the posture. The high priest, the greatest prophet in the history of Israel until Jesus Christ comes, are falling on their face in obeisance in the presence of, not before them. They are not bowing to the mob rule, but they are demonstrating their obeisance to God in front of them. Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, of those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes, and they spoke to all the congregation of the sons of Israel, saying, "The land which we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord is pleased with us, then he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only this, do not rebel against Yahweh, and do not fear the people of the land, for they will be our prey." Their protection has been removed from them, and Yahweh is with us. Do not fear them. But all the congregation said to stone them with stones. This is somebody's illustration of Caleb here. This is a public domain. You can see sort of, kind of, the rocks they're using. Do y'all like the show Old Yeller? You ever watch Old Yeller? Nobody? There's a TV show I used to watch where one of the characters' moms never let her watch the end of Old Yeller. She never knew the dog died. She was like 50. But you remember that in that show, there's a little boy chucking rocks all the time. And the older brother says, "I wish I'd never taught that boy to chuck rocks." It's these little bitty things like you're skipping stones, right? That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about an irritation. We're not talking about you might shoot a stray dog in the rump with a BB gun. It's not going to break the skin. They had to use stones that were bigger than their fist and smaller than their head, roughly, is the principle that we understand. They wanted to stone them with stones. Caleb, Joshua, Moses, and Aaron, I think. All four of them. Fear does crazy, insane things in the minds of people. Who are the righteous people in this interaction? The people who are saying, believe God's promise. Those are the righteous people. They will flee before us like prey. Now, we do distinguish as hunters, right? Because there is some prey that people hunt that could theoretically hunt you back, right? Predators, they could do that. They generally don't, I don't think. I mean, there's exceptions. Generally, that principle that God put the fear of man into the animals back in creation, that is universal. I mean, you might back something into a corner and that fights. But generally, if you're hunting something, these guys, he's saying it doesn't matter that we're the grasshoppers and they're the giants. We're going to chase them and they're going to flee from us. They have no protection. The picture is that God is sovereign over their purpose in the land. I'd recently, this last week, I finished up one of my classes for my PhD work, and I had to do a Hebrew exegetical. It's not my favorite thing to do in the world. I have to admit it, I don't love Hebrew. I have to work real hard to make my brain make Hebrew make sense. It just seems a very primitive language compared to Greek. And it is, right? It's way older. But I did it on Isaiah 5, 1-7. And in case you didn't just read that recently, it's a song, a parable that Isaiah teaches at the beginning in the introduction of Isaiah about God planting a vineyard. And everybody says, well, this is a parable. So it's actually not strictly a parable because it says, my beloved built a vineyard. He selected a great site for it. And he put great care into preparing it for the people. God literally did that. That's literally part of the promise of the land of Canaan, is that the Canaanites were doing that work in that fertile site where God was going to plant his people and expect fruitfulness of them. They literally dug the stones out of the field. They literally built fences and gates and protection around the vineyards. They literally did that. And God literally did that through them. And it was an exceedingly good place. And while they were doing God's work in the land, there was a protection over them in that land. But it was no more. The congregation said to stone them with stones. Can you imagine the looks on their faces? I imagine they were something akin to the people today, this week, if you said, you know what? It is never right to murder babies. It is never right to murder babies. It's never right to murder babies. Now, I was born in 1978, 5 years after the Supreme Court made, even Ruth Bader Ginsburg thought that Roe versus Wade was a terrible decision, by the way. And that tells you something, right? Ruth Bader Ginsburg, of all people, I thought that this was a foolish decision. But I do not remember people threatening other people's lives over it when I was a kid. Do you remember that? Well, you can't even think that it's wrong without people cursing your name and threatening your family. That's the anger level. Simply telling someone to embrace God's direct promises to them, and they want to kill their leaders. We still don't have anybody standing up here, right, to take Moses' place. They still want to appoint a leader. This is the thing about stoning your leaders. It's hard to get volunteers after that, right? Same thing, right? We say that as pastors. People tell us all the time, they tell us foolish things. Well, yes, I know this person is married, but I think the Lord wants us to be together anyway, they'll say. With a straight face, they'll say it to me, they've said it to me. With a straight face, and probably the burdened brow of death, I tell them, no, that is not correct. Pragmatically, you ought to understand something about the way this person adheres to promises, for one thing, that you're just the next person that they're going to cheat on. Very practically speaking, those are the numbers. So embrace God's promises for your marriage and demand that that person honor theirs and quit that behavior. So this leader, they haven't appointed him yet, but I doubt they're going to get any volunteers for this. So they I don't know, it doesn't say they picked up stones to stone with anybody with them yet. It's not quite like what we read about in Acts when Stephen is stoned. But they proclaimed this. I don't know how you could, you can't say this pleasantly, right? Stone them with stones. It's like saying, oh, I think we ought to crucify him. That's not how they said it, right? Then the glory of Yahweh appeared in the tent of meeting to all the sons of Israel. Moses and Aaron and obeisance, face down. The people wanting to stone them. Caleb and Joshua with their torn clothes in grief. Not anger. They can look similar. A lot of emotions end up looking like anger in their extreme, don't they? Extreme sorrow looks like anger. Fear looks like anger. Anger looks like anger. It's important to distinguish sometimes. But Yahweh said to Moses, how long will this people spurn me, and how long will they not believe in me, despite all the signs which I have performed in their midst? I don't see where Moses stood up. Now, that may not be an important detail. Moses is face down on the ground last time I saw him. How long are they going to do this? I will smite them with pestilence and dispossess them, and I will make you into a nation greater and mightier than they. I've told you before that I have a great admiration for Moses in times like this. This is not the first time that God has made this offer. I will strike them all down, and he can keep every single last one of his promises through the line of Moses, can't he? Certainly can. Every single one of them. It's a common principle in Scripture. Ultimately, you need to understand that, like history, you know what a chiasm is? Have you ever discussed what a chiasm is? People love to find them, but then they find them and you're like, yeah, but that doesn't really mean what you think it means. It's just how they thought. A chiasm is visually where things are brought to a common center. And so history moves towards a singular point, and then it moves from the singular point. Normally in world history, we put Jesus in the middle of that chiasm, right? So in terms of the covenants that were made to Israel, ultimately all of them, right, are found in one person. This principle is hard and fast in Scripture, that the Lord works through one individual, one covenant individual, to bring about the promises to the nation, to the people. And that's the offer he's making here. I only need you, Moses. You have the biology, you have the genetic material, you have the faithfulness, and I can do this. I will make you into a nation greater and mightier than they. Moses said to Yahweh, then the Egyptians will hear of it. for by your strength you brought up this people from their midst. And they will tell it to the inhabitants of this land. I don't know how that would happen. We don't know how good the mail service was, But this is what Moses is concerned for. They will tell it to the inhabitants of this land. They have heard that you, O Yahweh, are in the midst of this people. For you, O Yahweh, are seen eye to eye while your cloud stands over them, and you go before them in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. You're out there, Yahweh. They know who you are. They have their own spies. Right? There's a big pillar of cloud. Like y'all can see that, right? About every week there's something burning in Juarez. Something big. Y'all notice that? How close do you have to be to see that? I think you could be in Chaparral on the other side of the mountain normally and still see the black smoke coming, right? They're on the edge of Canaan. You can see it. It's not that big of a place. They can see the cloud. They can see the fire. Now, if you slay this people as one man, then the nations who have heard of your fame will say, because Yahweh could not bring this people into the land which he promised them by oath, therefore he slaughtered them in the wilderness. But now I pray, let the power of Yahweh be great, just as you have declared. With tremendous admiration for Moses. Face down in obeisance before the people, having a conversation with Yahweh. And Yahweh says, Moses, I can fix your problems. Every single one of them, all 6 million of them. I can fix it today. I can fix it. I'm sick of these people, and I think you are too, right? Remember that episode, was it Seinfeld? I got a lot of problems with you people, and you're going to hear about them. At Festivus? Y'all don't remember that because y'all are babies, right? My children know about it because I say it all the time. The airing of grievances. God has now aired his grievances, and he's about to bring some punishment to bear, and it's hinging on Moses' acceptance of the offer. And face down in the sand, dirt, next to his brother at the tent of meeting, hundreds of thousands, millions of people wanting to stone him. What is he concerned with? Yahweh's reputation among the nations of the earth, specifically the Canaanites. That's what he's concerned with. They're going to think they got away with something, God. They're going to think that you are not as powerful as even you think you are. Because their theology is going to be bad, but it's going to be their theology. They're going to believe something about you that is not true, and that's not the point of this operation. The point of the operation is to reveal who you are to the Canaanites and to the Israelites and to the Egyptians. That's going to create a real doctrinal problem. You mean doctrine matters and crap? No, excuse me, sorry. Yes, it matters. And it matters what we tell people about who God is, and it matters what our obedience tells other people about who God is. We need to ensure that we are communicating that God is powerful, and he's faithful, and he keeps his promises. Because they're not going to understand that. The truth will be is that you are absolutely and perfectly keeping all of your promises, but they won't know that for generations. How long did it take to take Jacob's family and turn it into a nation in Egypt? Bible scholars? How many years, Becky? 400, or there's that one passage, 430 centuries. Let's just say centuries. I think the farther you get from Genesis 3, the longer it takes. The world degrades as it goes on. That's why when you know, in the Old Testament you could have 6 kids, and people are like, well, that's a good start, right? Now you have 6 kids, they all think you're a bunch of morons, and what are you thinking? How could you do that? Not to mention all the 8 or 9 kid families we have at El Paso Bible Church. Think you're absolute nutters. It gets harder as the world degrades to be faithful to that process, in my estimation. But now I pray, let the power of Yahweh be great, just as you have declared. The Lord is slow to anger. Oh boy, Moses is starting to preach to Yahweh. This is where I have great admiration for the man, but by golly, Moses, you might want to step back a little, right? Yahweh is slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness, forgiving iniquity and transgression, but he will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the 3rd and the 4th generations. We've talked about that, right? The distinction. So in the law, God says that you shall not put the son to death for the sins of the father. It's very specific, right? The capital punishment is not to be extended generationally. There's not to be a blood guilt. In fact, we have that enshrined in our country's documents, that there's no blood guiltiness, no corruption of blood that is to be recognized. In other words, you don't commit, I don't know what it would be called. What is it? When you wipe out a whole family. It's not genocide unless they're the Meiers, because we have a lot of us, you know. Patricide, is that what they call that? Yeah. Well, that's killing your father, I think. It could be a form of that. Anyway, I like to use specificity, but I'm not always capable. You're not allowed to recognize that. However, he says, up to that point, there are practical ramifications, right? That there are consequences to the sin of the fathers that are passed along, and I can speak to this, to the 3rd and the 4th generations. He doesn't remove the consequences of that iniquity. Pardon, I pray, the iniquity of this people, according to the greatness of your loving kindness, just as you also have forgiven this people from Egypt even until now. Yes, sir. Familicide? I was about to say that, but then I thought I was going to coin the word, and then y'all get weird about that. If I coin a word up here. Okay, familicide? Okay, all right. Well, you learn something new every day, or you wasted the day, right? That's what they say. So I learned that I don't have to coin the word, and y'all don't have to look at me like I'm a weirdo. So if you hear me use that word, know that I didn't make it up, okay? It's already in the dictionary. Familicide. So you're not supposed to do that, right? But pragmatically, right, you're not supposed to put somebody to death for the sins of their father, but there are iniquities that are not cleared, right? And Moses says, pardon them. So what's he arguing for? No consequences. So, what do we got? We got Yahweh. I'm going to wipe these suckers out. Moses. No, pardon them all. Your loving kindness is great and you're able to do that. You've pardoned them over and over and over throughout the desert, from Egypt even until now. So Yahweh says, verse 20, we got 5 minutes. That's not what Yahweh said. That's what I said, sorry. So Yahweh said, it always surprises me, I have pardoned them according to your word. Moses? Can you imagine the regard God holds Moses in? I'm not the only one that holds Moses in admiration, it seems. I have pardoned them according to your word. I can't fathom the creator of the universe saying that to a human being, but he does. But indeed, as I live, all the earth will be filled with the glory of Yahweh. Surely, all the men who have seen my glory and my signs which I performed in Egypt and in the wilderness, yet have put me to the test these 10 times. Apparently, I don't know that all of them are recorded here, by the way. He says, these 10 times, and have not listened to my voice, shall by no means see the land which I swore to their fathers, nor shall any of those who spurned me see it. Y'all want to wander around in the wilderness? Which is what they said, right? Would that we had died in Egypt. Would that we had died in the wilderness. Let us appoint a leader. We'll go wander around in the wilderness like a bunch of chumps. You want to wander around in the wilderness? Okay. You're not going to enter the land which I swore to their fathers, nor shall any of those who spurned me see it. But my servant Caleb, because he's had a different spirit and has followed me fully, I will bring into the land which he entered, and his descendants shall take possession of it. Notice that God did not require Caleb to go in and single-handedly bear the entire responsibility of the entire army of Israel in order to be faithful. He merely had to state the truth of God's promise to the people and show grief as one of the leaders of the family, tearing his clothes and being grieved by their lack of obedience. And God honored that. So a different spirit, he has followed me fully, and I will bring into the land which he entered. His descendants shall take possession of it. We have 1 minute, so I'm going to stop. Now we got one verse. Hold on. So now the Amalekites and the Canaanites live in the valleys. Turn tomorrow and set out to the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea. Be turned back. Go back the way you came, right? That's the way they came. They passed through the Red Sea. So you're right on the cusp, right on the edge. You can send spies in. They can traipse around it for 40 days and make it back pretty easily. You're looking at it. You can see it. You see God's presence with you, but I want you to go that way. All right. Any questions? Comments? Accusations of heresy? Snide remarks? Yeah, Becky's got a snide remark. All right. Yeah.
Yesterday on the news, they had a woman who's holding up a sign saying, "I wish my mother had aborted me," in support of abortion.
Yeah.
And that just, at first, so ridiculous. But then I wondered if she just caught up in how terrible the world is going to be. I wish I wasn't alive as well.
Yeah, so you're commenting on the comparison of the self-loathing. These people wishing that they were dead in the wilderness, and this lady wishing that she had never been born. This is a common feature, actually. Y'all are studying Jonah. Jonah's standard answer for everything, "Oh, just take my life. I wish I were dead." You know, this is a human problem. People are stupid. They're stupid. And I think that somebody holds up a sign and says that I wish my life had ended shortly after conception is a liar or a fool. And they have, generally. Now, I'm supposed to be nice to everybody all the time, but telling people something other than this is not true, and that's not being nice, right? Y'all know how I feel about the term nice. We've explained it before. Essentially, people don't value life enough. And, you know, that they would, if they say that. My life hasn't been easy, therefore it hasn't been worth it. I have a very low opinion of somebody who can say that. I was told 20 years ago that I should write a journal of all the things that Priscilla and I experienced in the last 22 years of our marriage, because otherwise people wouldn't believe it. I didn't do it because I forgot the forks. But it comes up. I'm not a journaling guy. It comes up, though, and the Lord brings it to mind. We've had some pretty rough goes of it. I think anybody who's been married for a decent amount of time has had a pretty rough go of it here and there. Never once in my mind has it crossed my mind, I wish my mother had never borne me. And to be quite honest, my family bears a lot of the iniquity that passes from generation to generation and its consequences. I would never have thought for one moment that I wish I had never been born. Wish I had never been conceived. I wish my mom had aborted me. That's lunacy. That's lunacy that's been normalized in our civilization. This is lunacy, by the way. When Jonah says it, he's on the verge of a lunatic breakdown, in my opinion. When Elijah says it, same thing. I mean, I think nothing else to say. Would it be better for all of us to have died out in the wilderness and let our bones rot in the sun? No, stupid. It would be better to die at least believing God with a sword in your hand, stupid. So get control of yourself, take up your sword, and follow Caleb. Would you do that? That's how I see it, right? And so when I see somebody that holds up a poster board and says, I wish my mom had aborted me, I'm like, shut up. You don't even know what you're talking about. You're an idiot or crazy, and you need medication. Because they're just being flamboyant at that. I suspect she's just getting shock value. Yeah, Bill. I'm sorry? Frequently, yes. Yeah, I mean, that's been their justification this whole time. So we had, 65 or 70 million people aborted? We went way over, guys, but this is right now. Everyone says, well, think about how bad the world would have been with all those extra 70 million people around. Well, dummy, y'all were just complaining about all the people that got killed by a pandemic. That's not even counting all the people that got killed by government because of the way they responded to the pandemic, which may have been averted by one of the 70 million people who was a scientist that would have dealt with the problem, idiot. There are 70 million souls that you terminated in the womb, dummy, and you have no idea what the Lord would have done with those lives. All right, I'm not supposed to say dummy, idiot, or crap, but I just did it anyway. All right, so if you have any other questions or comments, we're way over donut time. So come to me afterwards. Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your word. We thank you for your faithfulness. We thank you that your glory is seen in the world, even though many of your people are fools. We thank you for that commitment. We thank you for your faithfulness to your promises. And it's your Son's name we pray.